Okay, my friends, today we are going to take up a topic which is very, very important from the point of view of India. In India, you find that we have a large number of times outbreaks of food poisoning which occurs many a time wherever there are large gatherings, the food gets contaminated, and this contamination of food may take place because of poor hygienic conditions, poor sanitation, or water which is contaminated, or foodstuffs which are contaminated. So let's see how we are going to we'll try to learn about food poisoning, though investigation of an outbreak of food poisoning is a separate chapter in itself. So I will be just touching upon that. Today we'll be just covering as to what are the causes of food poisoning and how we can prevent food poisoning, while investigation of an outbreak of food poisoning is most interesting, and this is something which we will talk about in detail, possibly have already talked about in detail when we talked about in epidemiology. So, food poisoning is an acute gastroenteritis caused by ingestion of food or drink contaminated by either bacteria, toxins, chemical substances, or poisons. It is basically, when we talk about in epidemiology, it is a point source epidemic. It's a point source epidemic. So please remember this, that if you have an outbreak which is almost immediately after a consumption of a meal, that means there is something which is already there in the food which is causing the problem. That means it should be a toxin. If it is taking time, takes a day or so, that means it is something which has to grow in your body, that is bacteria. So toxins or chemicals can produce immediate reaction, while other things like bacteria will take a little long, bacteria and viruses for that matter. So what are the characteristics of this? History of ingestion of a common food, attack of many persons at the same time, and similarity of the signs and symptoms. These are classical features of a food poisoning outbreak. These can be classified into two types: non-bacterial, that is, as you said, chemicals, especially arsenic, mercury, cadmium, fertilizers getting into food, very, very often happens in the fields, etc. Fertilizers getting into food, pesticides getting into food, certain plant and seafoods which get contaminated, or it can be bacterial or viral poisoning. The bacterial poisoning, it can be infective and toxic types, generally caused by Salmonella, Staph, botulism, CLOSTRIDIUM perfringens, and Bacillus cereus. Please remember these five of them: Salmonella, Staph, botulism, CLOSTRIDIUM perfringens, and Bacillus cereus. These are the 5 major causes of bacterial poisoning. So what happens in Salmonella poisoning? In Salmonella poisoning, there is generally occurs in the communal feeding which is there, and because of international trade, people are also exporting or importing Salmonella from various food products which are there, eggs and various other food products, farm animals. So salmonellosis occurs in farm animals and then is transmitted, sent around. It is also, salmonella poisoning can occur in prepared foods. Or now what happens you see, sewage treatment plants are supposed to function well if left to their own recourses. You have got anaerobic and aerobic digestion which is going on. Why do these digestions take place? These digestions take place because of the fact that there are the relevant amount of bacilli which can cause this particular aerobic or anaerobic digestion. But when we put detergents in our drains, in our sewage, these bacilli which are useful to us will get killed. And hence, if you have salmonella which is present in sewage, it will keep growing in the sewage. Now, canned food, this is also one of the things which is there, canned food or various other products which are there. These all things can have salmonella poisoning. Now, which are the agents which are there? Salmonella typhimurium, cholera suis or enteritis. Gram-negative bacilli, motile with peritracheal flagella, parasitize the large intestine of many animals and man. Source is infected farm animals, poultry, byproducts, contaminated meat, milk products, eggs, very large source from eggs or contaminated meat and milk products. Rats and mice may contaminate the food by the urine and feces. You see what happens, many a time we keep on storing tins in various locations. We store the tins and then we don't realize that the rats and mice, they go around these tins, they possibly urinate or defecate in these areas which are there. We take a tin, cut it and have it. So when you cut it, whatever is on top of that tin will go into the inside the tin. Kindly ensure that any tin which is taken prior to opening the tin, we require to wash the top of the tin where we are going to cut the tin, so that we do not put infective organisms inside the tin. There are temporary human carriers also for this infection. Incubation period is 12 to 24 hours and multiplication of the infective organism takes place in the intestine. Clinically, it may present as it's a salmonella. So salmonella typhi is also a salmonella, so it may be similar to a typhoid fever or enteric fever. It can become as a gastroenteritis, and if you don't look after the patient, the patient may go into septicemia with or without a focal separation. And the carrier states, just like in typhi, we have some carrier states are known for this case. What are the problems which can occur is sudden onset of fever with chills and rigors, nausea, vomiting, profuse watery diarrhea lasting for 2 to 3 days. Mortality is 1%. So generally it's a disease which can be well controlled, can be easily controlled. So, staphylococcal poisoning. We have talked about salmonella, now we talked about staph. Staph is enterotoxins or coagulase positive strains of Staph aureus. Basically, it is the toxins. In staph, we are looking at toxins. Gram-positive cocci, heat stable and resist boiling for 30 minutes or more. So it's very dicey because it resists boiling. Source is ubiquitous in nature. It's there everywhere: skin, nose, throat, man, animals. So many a time staph is got from a pustule which is there on a person, on a cook's hand. So many, you must, whenever there is a food handler, must check their hands, look at the web spaces, look at whether they have any cuts or bruises or boils on their hands which can transmit staph infection. Cows suffering from mastitis, they'll give you milk and milk products which have got staph poisoning. But the benefit in India is that we really do a rolling boiling of the milk before we use it. So remember, it is a heat-stable vaccine, and so it can heat-stable toxin. So the toxin can, if it is already toxin is there, the bacilli may get killed, but the toxin may not get killed. Salads and custards, salads also because we are not cooking it, and custards, incubation period 1 to 6 hours. Ingestion, basically the mechanism of food poisoning is the ingestion of the preformed toxin. That is what I'm trying to say. Preformed toxin which is there is the one, if it is ingested, then it has got a lot of problems. Acts on the central nervous system in the intestines. You may have fever, pyrogenic, mitogenic, hypertensive, thrombocytopenia, cytotoxic, all these things can take place. So clinical effects of vomiting, as I told you, if you're looking at anything which is taking place in a short time, 1 to 6 hours. 1 to 6 hours means that there is something already causing a poison. Either it is a chemical poison or it is a toxin. If it is a bacilli which is causing the problem, it will take time. This bacilli has already produced the toxin and the toxin is ready. That is the reason why it is causing problems immediately. So it can cause vomiting, abdominal cramps, diarrhea, blood and mucus in severe cases. The other very serious ones are the Clostridium botulism, causing botulism. Type A, B or E is gram-positive bacilli, and again we are looking at a toxin. Thermolabile toxin, again this toxin which is it is produced in anaerobic conditions. So botulism, as you are aware, Clostridium botulism is distributed in the soil, dust and the intestinal tracts of animals, so any contamination from these sources can cause problems. Home canned, the canned foods and vegetables, meat, pickles, all these, especially pickles. Pickles are a good source of botulism if they are contaminated. So we must ensure that our pickles do not get contaminated. Homemade cheese, anything which is stored items, all these stored items, Clostridium botulism can be there, and then it can produce a toxin in that. The incubation period is 12 to 36 hours, and this progenitor toxin which is there is activated by trypsin. So when it goes into the intestinal tract, it gets activated. A preformed toxin, the intradietetic, acts on the parasympathetic nervous system. That is the problem. The CNS is the one which is involved. So, and botulism toxin is a very strong toxin, so you have to be very careful. It can cause dysphagia, diplopia, ptosis, blurring of vision, dysarthria, muscle weakness, quadriplegia, and death may occur in 4 to 8 days due to respiratory or cardiac failure. Now, in infants, the botulism can create even further problems. Infection of the gut by Clostridium botulism with in vivo production of the exotoxin can take place, and that is a problem which is there. So we have to be very careful, especially with children. Treatment in case of botulism is to give an antitoxin, and dose is from 50,000 to a lakh units. Guanidine hydrochloride is given orally, 15 to 40 milligram per kg body weight, which reverses the neuromuscular block of botulism. And active immunization is also can be given, botulism toxoid. The next one which we consider is Clostridium welchi or Clostridium perfringens. Gram-positive bacilli, anaerobic spore forming bacilli. Again, source is from the feces of humans and animals, soil and water. So basically when you start looking at it, what we are looking at is sanitation. If we have sanitation, food poisoning will not take place. If we clean our tins well before we open them, if we keep our area properly where infections cannot occur, contaminations do not occur, we will have less of food poisoning. The source is the feces of humans, animals, soil, water and air. meat and poultry products which are contaminated. Food cooked 24 hours before consumption allowed to cool slowly and heated again prior to serving. Now what can happen is you cook it 24 hours earlier, but don't refrigerate it. You keep it, and then when it is cooling is the ideal time for the bacilli to grow. So if contamination takes place that time, the bacilli will keep growing in that food, and then you heat it up, but you don't heat it up fully. Then you are giving the bacilli an ideal environment to grow in. Incubation period 6 to 24 hours. Peak is 10 to 14 hours. The resistant spores survive cooking and germinate. That's what I said. They'll germinate if you don't raise the temperature to very high temperatures. You give them an ideal temperature of 30 to 50 degrees, and it's not cooled enough, so we are having chances of having the toxins, alpha, theta, and all these other toxins which are there. The clinical symptoms are lower GI tract symptoms, prominent diarrhea, abdominal cramps, and a rapid recovery which is possible. Cases of CNS problem where you have a opisthotonus. Bacillus cereus, another very common bacillus which is involved in food poisonings. Again, an enterotoxin of Bacillus cereus is the one which creates the problem. Aerobic spore-bearing motile gram-positive bacilli, and the spores are heat-resistant. The source is soil, raw, dried, and processed food. Again, the same story of contamination through soil, and two distinct toxins which are there, which are two different types of food poisoning. One toxin which is the enteric form, it creates incubation of 1 to 6 hours, which is a toxin which is ready-made toxin which is there, which causes upper GI tract symptoms. While if it goes into the intestine and then you have a diarrheal form which is 12 to 24 hours, that's a lower intestinal tract symptom. So Bacillus cereus is two types of disease. One is the emetic form and one is the diarrheal form. Diagnosis attack of many persons together. Symptoms, you should look for the symptoms and do a lab diagnosis. Food poisoning cases may be mistaken for cholera, bacillary dysentery, and chemical poisoning. So this is what we should differentiate. In the epidemiology, you will find that there's a point source, also occurs in cholera, but the incubation period in cholera is 5 days, while food poisoning it is almost immediate or maybe 24 hours. Onset is, food poisoning can be any type, two types. Vomiting or purging. Vomiting can start off, which is there, and if it is immediate, if the toxin is present, otherwise later on the vomiting and diarrhea will start. While in cholera, it is mainly first is the purging which is there. Vomiting in the cholera is projectile, effortless, watery and continuous, while in food poisoning it's single, severe, mucus, blood-stained. Stools, rice water, here you got bloody diarrhea. Muscular cramps are common in cholera because you got lots of fluids going out. Abdominal tenderness is present in case of food poisoning, not in the cholera. Then the other things which are there is leukocytosis and body temperature because of the amount of fluid which is going, and person going into shock is maybe subnormal. But here in food poisoning you will have no changes in the blood, but temperature may be there. So what do you do in investigation of food poisoning? In investigation of food poisoning, once you reach there, it's very, very essential that you immediately ensure that food from the location is saved, preserved, and sent for testing. You require to secure a list of people who are involved in this thing, and there what you have to take is foods which have been eaten during the past 24 to 48 hours, the symptoms, and the personal data. You make out a chart, make out person has had the food or not had the food, if you're suspecting a particular food, had the food or not had the food. A lab investigation, isolation of causative organism from stool, vomitus, and remnant food. Stool samples of kitchen employees and phage typing of the organism to be done. You can do animal experiments in botulism, look for antibodies, retrospective study, or you should do an environmental study, that is inspect the eating place, kitchens, food handlers, and then you do a data analysis. So this basically what you're going to do is you make out the chart, and from the chart you find out how many who have had the particular food and suffered, and how many who have not had the food and suffered. Then you will calculate what we call the attributable risk. How do you prevent food poisoning? Food sanitation, personal hygiene. Individuals involved in food handling and preparation must have maintained the highest standards of food and keep the area clean. Food handlers, you should do a medical examination regularly. Day-to-day health appraisal should be done. As I said, when you come to a food handler, first thing is you must ensure that a stool examination is done. You must ensure that the patient remains clean. There is no his hair, hands, fingers, nails. These are all to be checked. Personal hygiene is very, very important. Yeah, it is mentioned here, health education about personal hygiene, clean hands, use of head coverings, habits. You see, you can't, person is coming for cooking for a large institution, must ensure the aprons are used, not use the street clothes. The hand should be washed. Hand washing in COVID times, we keep on telling, but otherwise also hand washing is most important. And you've learned very well as to how to wash the hands. Wash the hands, web spaces, wash the nails, the area of your wrist. Every single point should be cleaned. Back of the hands. All these things should be cleaned. Minimum amount of time spent is 20 seconds. Not less than that. Not less than that. So, illness from food handlers' family should be noted. Also, handling of ready-to-eat foods with bare hands should be prevented. Rapid cooling and cold storage should not be done. We should try this. We should pasteurization of milk and milk products and eggs should be done, and a thorough cooking of food should be carried out. Sanitary improvements, sanitization of all the work, utensils and equipment is very, very important. Food premises should be free from rats, mice, flies and dust. Garbage disposal should be you should ensure that the garbage is locked in. You should not be able to breed flies, which is there. Meat inspection. Now when you do a meat inspection, see that the slaughterhouse, the location is far away from habitation, is on a high ground, it is firm surface, cemented surface. The meat should be, the place where you hang the meat should be hygienic. All these things should be looked at. The structure should be strong. We should not have any stagnation of water. Water supply should be clean. Disposal of waste should be proper. Not that there are dogs coming and feeding on it. Storage of meat should be there. There should be a walk-in freezer. Transportation of meat should be good. Examination of animals should be done by a veterinarian, preferably by a veterinarian. Efficient pasteurization of milk should be done. Use of fresh fish. Fish is one thing which gets contaminated very fast, so use of fresh fish should be done. Tin fish should be inspected regularly. Fresh eggs without any fecal matter on the shell can be used, so be very careful. You can have a lot of salmonella infection through eggs. Wash the eggs before you break them. That's the ideal way. Health education, education of food handlers, education of the community is very, very important. Service should be based on the 6 E themes, that is enforcement, encouragement, education, engagement, excellence and equality. This I can keep on mentioning in various lectures, but these are the 6 E's which are very, very important in any, whether here or whether in any other health chapter. So in enforcement, you have food premises inspection, sampling, complaints about food premises, and food hazards warning, and food poisoning and infectious disease investigation should be done. You should encourage people and give them awards. Food safety award schemes should be there. Education, you can have training courses, newsletters, school projects, food safety presentations. Then engagement liaison with other agencies, food business and consumers, food safety focus groups, all you should go in for. And should have excellent quality standards and an equality policy, which will ensure that basically one should remember that whenever you're looking at food, it should be cooked and eaten the same day. Storage of food should be done at least below 4 degrees centigrade. Food should never be left warm in warm vessels. We have got this nowadays, this craze which is there, food warmers which keep the food warm for long periods of time. Very bad. It can give ideal situation for bacteria to grow. So cook and eat on the same day is the golden rule. Surveillance, periodic lab analysis of food establishment should be done, and inspection of food preparation, storage and serving places. Okay. Don't let SALMONELLA party in your fridge. You have the bacilli having a party in your fridge because you kept the fridge open. Eat well, stay well. Thank you.